And my mom
Yeah.
said, it's funny, Malika, because you've traveled so many places and you have such tolerance for people, but then you have zero
Mhm.
tolerance for your brothers. And I just thought, whoa, it's so true. But it's
Yeah, we should have different perspective because our thought created by our experience, and we all have
yeah.
different experience. Hello, Sobat Kokamuhi. Welcome to the first Kokamuhi podcast series where we talk about engaging the community on Better Earth. I'm Nikita, your host, who will guide you to this conversation during this podcast. Today, we will talk about how to start communicating with different people. Our guest today is Miss Miliki, who has had many journey talking to different group of people, and I met her during her internship in Indonesia. We talk a lot about sustainability and community, which I really enjoy the most. In today's episode, I'm so happy to welcome you, Miss Miliki. Hello, Miss Miliki.
Hello, Nikita. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure. I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, I also very happy to have you today. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. It's Good Friday, so there is
Yeah.
a good energy, good vibes. So I'm
Yes.
very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel your good energy too.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, so in today's podcast, we will talk about how to start communicate with different group of people. For me personally, the word starting is challenging because yeah, when we try to start something, we need to effort ourselves to go. But um we can complete something by starting. So yeah, I'm really happy to start this conversation. And yeah, to start this conversation, let's start with your background because I know that your cultural background is unique. And can you tell us your cultural background and your academic background? And can you tell us about what makes you interested in studying cross cultural communication?
Yes, sure, I can. So a bit about my cultural background. Both my parents are Turkish. So my grandparents from my mom's side immigrated to Denmark back in the 70s when a lot of Northern European countries were
Mhm.
sort of calling for workforce from the southern countries. My parents are both Turkish, also making me sort of genetically, culturally Turkish in many ways. At the
Mhm.
same time, I'm born and raised in Denmark. I have lived
Mhm.
there my whole life. Um,
Mhm.
so, in many ways, I also resonate with being Danish, especially when it comes
Mhm.
to education system and working culture,
Mhm.
because that's very much where I've been, in a Danish institution. When
Mhm.
it comes to family values, and when it comes
Mhm.
to the way I express myself emotionally, it becomes very
Mhm.
southern, very Turkish in a different way, sort of stereotypically speaking. Um,
Mhm.
and then in 2018, I moved to the Netherlands. So I live here in
Mhm.
Eindhoven together with my husband because he's Dutch.
Mhm.
So I'm further experiencing interesting sort of cultural differences now that I'm
Mhm.
here. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's a bit sort of culturally to speak, culture pure based on nations.
Mhm.
And from my academic background, well, I started um, looking internationally very early. So already when I was, what was I then, 15? In Denmark, you choose your high school when you're 15. And already then I chose for international trade because everyone at that high school who chose international trade, they got to
Mhm.
go abroad a lot. So that was when I was 15 years old. That was just perfect. That's what I wanted. Um, so it was always about sort of not only studying your own economics and your own trade and your own way of doing business, but it was a lot about, yeah, looking abroad, having a global view. So then After high school, I studied English and organizational communication
Mhm.
at Copenhagen Business School. And that was, I wouldn't say necessarily with a focus on, I had courses in intercultural communication, but that wasn't the major, that wasn't the main focus. But that was what definitely interested me the most. So I went on to do my master in intercultural communication last year,
Mhm.
and graduated in August. And yeah, part of my master's was, of course, my internship in Indonesia, which was an amazing
Yes.
experience.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've always been super drawn to experiences abroad, to meeting people from different places, and I think a bit analyzing myself, it comes from always having multiple sort of cultures in my upbringing. Um, so yeah, long answer. Hope that covers it.
Yeah. Yeah. I consider that you got international exposure since you were born, because your parents are Turkish, and then you was
Yeah.
born in Denmark. Yeah, yeah, same thing. My my parents are Indonesian, but because my father took the master and doctoral degree in Japan, so I was born in Japan. So I got
Yeah.
Japanese culture first, but during
Yeah.
when I interact with my parents, I got Indonesian culture. So we have the same thing
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Yes, and
definitely. Definitely.
yeah. And talking about multicultural communication, I know that you have such a long journey about this. And in your perspective, how do you define communication with diverse groups, and what makes it necessary in the era where we live with multicultural people?
Yeah. No, good question. I think I used to define cross-cultural communication or intercultural communication very much based on nations. So very much say I am from Denmark, I want to communicate with someone from, I don't know, France, Japan, you name it. And then that would be the moment that I would say, oh, okay, we're talking about cross-cultural communication because we're talking about different nations or different countries. Um, and yeah, I think that's a lot of people view it like that, and with good reason. um what I've learned during my master, and what really also changed a bit my view, is also to break down cultures into smaller groups. So for example, age or generation or gender or political belief or religion, that is also all cultures. um and that sort of also changed my view, in the sense of we're not only culturally aware because I communicate with someone from another country, but if I communicate with someone who's much, much older than me, I might also adjust the way that I speak. I might
Mm-hmm.
talk with less slang. I might use less sort of English terms in my Danish or in my Turkish,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, so in that sense, yeah, and the same with someone from a political belief. There are things that I find obvious or good for society, and then if you talk to someone else who believes something quite opposite, yeah, you're not going to have the same baseline. So then it also requires maybe a bit more adaptation. So that's a bit more how I view it now. I still acknowledge that, yeah, coming from different countries can impact the way that you think and behave. But it has helped me, I would say it has helped me assume less that because I'm speaking with someone from the same country,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't have cultural differences, because we surely still do. Um, yeah, so I'd say like I defined it much broader. And I think that has also helped me in understanding people more, instead of being, I would always, and I still do it a lot, but I have a tendency, if I go abroad, I'm more tolerant because I'm expecting cultural differences. And then when I'm in my own circles at work, for example, I can be very intolerant
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, yeah, how do you not get that? Because
Yeah.
you assume that we are in the same space, we are in the same city. So you assume that your cultural background and your cognitive way of thinking must be the same, but it's just totally not. So I would say I am trying in the way that I'm broadening my understanding of what yeah, cultural communication is, also to be more tolerant. Um, why is it important to me? Has to do, I think, for first of all, to broaden my own horizon, to
Mhm.
understand that everything has different ways of viewing things. And I think for me, as I said, being brought up in Denmark but with a Turkish family, it seemed always very logical that almost everything, or not everything, but a lot of things or phenomenon would have different meaning.
Mhm.
But then as I started really studying it, you also learn to put words to it.
Mhm.
So for me, it also just, yeah, personally clicked. But I would also say that if you want to solve a problem in a group
Mhm.
or in a
Mhm.
society or in a
Mhm.
country, whatever, if you understand that different people will come with different
Mhm.
perceptions of the problem or the issue
Mhm.
or the solution, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's a bit on why it's personal to me, but also why I think if you want to solve something, you
Yeah.
have to start from a base of understanding not everyone sees the same problem, and not it doesn't affect everyone the same.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
think,
that's
yeah, I
true.
think that's necessary.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said first you see different group as different nation, different country, and then um now you see the different groups being different age, different political perspective, and the other thing. And yeah, from learning multicultural, it teach us about how to understand people and how to move tolerant so we can
Yeah.
work in group together, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we try to communicate with people, with different group of people, of course there are some common challenge such as language barrier or some sensitive culture. Can you, from your own experience, what are some common challenge that you have encountered when you communicate with different groups of people?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. As I said before, I actually think that I experience the most challenges when I don't expect cultural differences. So
Uh,
when I travel, if as soon as I'm packing to go to an airport,
mhm,
I am wired to experience something else. How would you say it? I'm preparing myself mentally and I'm seeking that. So I'm noticing on myself that I'm much more tolerant and I'm much more curious to understand people's
mhm,
minds. And I'm
mhm,
much less assuming that what I think is right is necessarily
mhm,
the best way to
mhm,
do it.
mhm,
Um, I definitely, if I and it's something I've realized a bit later on, that
mhm,
that same tolerance that I bring with me
mhm,
abroad is not necessarily what I have in my
mhm,
own circle. And it was
mhm,
actually a bit my mom that made me aware of
mhm,
this late last
mhm,
year. I argue a lot
mhm,
with my brothers because we're
mhm,
siblings, and I think siblings, yeah, I don't know, whatever. We always do. We have a lot of
mhm.
arguments. We see things so differently. And my mom
Yeah.
said, "It's funny, Malika, because you've traveled so many places and you have such tolerance for people, but then you have zero
Mhm.
tolerance for your brothers." And I just thought, whoa, it's so true. But it's just this thing of like in my own home, in my own house, I'm not expecting these
Mhm,
kind of cultural
mhm,
ways differences, but my
mhm,
brothers have different kind of group friends. They have different kind of political beliefs. They have
mhm,
different kind of education, so we have different ways of viewing things, such as
mhm,
should we have the corona vaccine or not,
mhm,
topics like this always come up in my family very politically. And then I can have such little tolerance because I think, how can you think like this? um but I'm not necessarily curious to understand what goes on there. So I would say those are
mhm,
my, yeah, my cultural clashes. I would say the harshest has been at my work, has been at my home with my family or whatever, when I don't expect it and when I'm not
mhm.
open to it, if that makes sense.
Uh, That's
Yeah.
interesting that you experience the cultural barrier in your family, and yeah, now you aware about that, so you have more tolerant and more understanding in people, including your
Yeah.
own family. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
indeed, indeed. I now try sometimes. So when I visit my family, of course, I have to go to Denmark. So I fly to Denmark, and sometimes I try to wire myself to be the same level of tolerant of like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to my family. They do different things than I do. They have different interests than I do, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And and it's not. I think also being culturally aware is not always just agreeing, right? And it's not always just being
Mhm.
super understanding, but it is at
Mhm.
least trying to understand that
Mhm.
your opinion comes from a different place than mine, and to be
Mhm.
curious and to say, oh, okay, how come you think like that,
Mhm.
instead of you think wrong and I think right.
Yeah,
And that's when
I
it
agree with
clashes, I
you.
would say.
Mhm. Yeah, the thing
Yeah.
is not only about outside to inside, but we need to understand people. So it also like outside to inside, inside to outside, so we can have a better understanding for each other. So it makes the communication better and better. And one of the
Yeah.
key is less assuming people, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a funny sort of realization. Actually, it's very recent for me to realize
Mm-hmm.
this. But yeah, I think it's good to realize, because of course I would want to offer my friends and family the same level of tolerance as I give
Yeah.
strangers when I abroad.
Mm-hmm.
That would be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. We give the tolerance to people abroad, to the stranger. Why not for our family? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the
exactly,
thing that
exactly.
everyone needs to remind. So our
Yeah,
audience needs to remind about this.
yeah,
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
tolerance to
that's such a
family as well.
yeah. Think
Yeah.
about family.
Yeah, and I
Okay,
think even
okay.
so often, like if I sit with my friends, so often we talk about, why don't my parents understand this? I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
like we this intolerance towards, why don't they just understand this? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that this also a cultural difference, and that's also
Yeah.
cultural awareness to say, okay, they come from a different reality, things were
Mm-hmm.
different, and meet them with the same tolerance. So it's not that far from the same category, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I have heard about it because yeah, recently I heard about new parenting method, and yeah, the tolerance between child and parents is important to make better communication and better connection.
Yeah,
And
yeah, definitely.
let's okay, and let's move into the communicating environmental problem to wide range group of society. So we have age, we have yeah, and
Mm,
then the other thing. So you know, for people who want to begin communication, it will be hard for them to articulate and communicate the environmental to different group of people. And do you have any recommendation for people that want to start their journey become more articulate in communicating about environmental issue to different group of people, including variety of age of people?
yeah, yeah. So you're asking, how can people communicate with other
Mm-hmm.
diverse groups about specifically environmental issues?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think actually, especially for environmental issues, it's such a broad topic.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think with any topic that is this broad, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean, like, it is to realize that it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
um and that is across so many factors. So environmental issues
Mm-hmm.
in itself, environmental issues is already broad. What does that mean? Does a person,
Mm-hmm.
when they say it refers to global warming, do they refer
Mm-hmm.
to animal welfare? Are
Mm-hmm.
they concerned with resources, lack of
Mm-hmm.
resources, or are they talking about the
Mm-hmm.
oceans increasing? What kind of
Yeah.
environmental issues are we talking about? And to what level is that important to an individual? It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
someone living in a very warm country might care more for global warming than someone in a cold country, because we
Mm-hmm.
tend to joke about, well, it's getting sunny today, God bless global
Yeah.
warming. Obviously, it's a joke, but it's just to say, I think what I experience is that environmental issues are, one, it's a broad phenomena, and even when you start dissecting it, it's going to mean different things to different people, and the
Mm-hmm.
impact is different for everyone. So I think it's really
Yeah.
important to discuss it more specifically, and also to have the conversation of, how often do you think about this problem? Is it a problem to you? Because I also think for some, will go around living their lives and won't be impacted, maybe do not interact with other people that care a whole lot, and then it can be difficult to tell someone what to do and what not to do based on a problem that they don't feel they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can also be that someone has a problem that is about environmental issues, but they don't know it's connected.
Mm-hmm.
um so I think it's important to really dissect what does that mean, to you, to any group, when you go into a conversation, and not assume that when we say environmental issues, what we think of is the same, because it will definitely not be the same. Even very simple things are not the same. And then environmental issues is so big and so complex.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that is important. And I think not assuming that everyone thinks it's a problem. And I know that's really harsh to hear, because I know you're so passionate about it. But
Mm-hmm.
environmental issues isn't a problem to everyone. They don't maybe think about it. Maybe they don't have the.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's also a luxury to be able to think about environmental issues. Maybe you have financial
Mm-hmm.
issues in your family that are right now heavier. So I would say, like, specify the topic, but also specify the importance to that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The point that
is
I
that
got is, yeah, we need to specify first the topic or the problem, and then try to ask about, is this problem connected to these people? If not,
yeah,
it's would be harder for us to communicate. So find it easier topic, the connected topic to people, then we
yeah,
can, that it will be easier for people to to understand the problem, because
yeah.
they also experience that problem. Some.
Yeah. Yeah, and different problems. I talked about this with a friend not too long ago, and
Mhm.
what I experienced during my childhood, environmental issues was very often linked um to polar bears, that polar because
Ah,
the
I
ice is
see.
melting, then polar bears find it
Mhm.
really difficult to survive. And I
Mhm.
mean this with all respect, but when you've never seen a live polar bear in your life, and you are,
Mhm.
15 years old or younger, it's really difficult and abstract to understand that what I am doing affects a polar bear somewhere that I don't know, in an environment that I've never experienced.
Mhm.
That becomes just so distant, and that's what I mean of, I think the closer we can bring it to ourselves, like, how does it impact me and my
Mhm.
surroundings? I think that
Mhm.
I think that's the better. That's when I think you have a more tangible conversation.
Ah, I see. I see. So
Yeah,
by doing tangible conversation, it would be easier to reach people, and it touch people emotion, people feeling. Yeah,
yeah,
that's something
yeah,
interesting to tell our audience, that how we can reach the audience, and what we need to consider about the first thing about this, the specific topic, and then go to how that's connected to people, so people can feel what the impact, and yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Such a
definitely. And I think it
statement.
can be sometimes difficult when you're really into a subject and you're really
Mm-hmm.
knowledgeable about it, which you are about this,
Yeah.
of course. I also experienced that when we met first time. Because you have so much
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, sometimes it can be difficult to only listen and hear other
Mm-hmm.
stories, because you have all the technical terms to complete
Yeah.
the conversation. So we tend to explain a lot, but we
Mm-hmm.
first need to ask a lot and receive, and then we need to
Mm-hmm.
connect what you know with what they, are as well sharing. Otherwise, yeah, I think it goes
Mm-hmm.
over people's heads if it gets
Mm-hmm.
not relevant or too difficult to understand.
Yeah. the thing is, don't always position yourself in explaining, but try to position the other people. Uh,
Yeah,
do they can understand us, because
yeah,
we have like language barrier, and the way they talk is different than us. Yeah, that's the multicultural thing, right? That we
yeah,
need to think about. Yeah.
yeah.
And let's go to the next question.
Hmm.
So we face urgent global environmental programs. The word global is, yeah, the collection of nation, the collection of country, right? And
Yeah.
the urgent global environmental problems require worldwide collaboration to create a better environment, knowing that each country has different work ethic. Do you see any strategy in communication that develops the bond in global communication?
Mm, so it's yeah. So I just want to maybe dissect this. So it's about how can we? So we need to collaborate globally,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have different
Yes.
work ethics, and how can all of these
Mm-hmm.
things sort of come together?
Yes. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Um. I think. Um. How do you say it? I think also it's important to understand that you can have a common goal, but then different
Mm-hmm.
ways that everyone does that. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, maybe it's a strange example, but let's say that one society they have a lot of canals, a lot of lakes, and it's full of plastic in them. Maybe they want to make it a goal that they want to pick out the plastic, they want to figure out a better solution. Another society will not have lakes or canals, so they
Mm-hmm.
cannot do this specific practice, right? But they can do other things to support the environment. So, and maybe for them, the environment means eating less meat, or it means growing your own vegetables. It means maybe not transporting things globally, but using local. So then you also save on the transport. Um, so then the common goal can still be, and that's why it needs to be specified. Let's say the common goal is CO2 emission, just to say something. Then you can still find different practices in different places with the same goal. I think that's really important to not assume that everyone is capable of the same things due to their environment they're in or whatnot, because it won't be. And I think that's why it's so important to specify what environmental issues means, and therefore what we can what we can do. I think where the global is very important to not lose the track of global is really that we need to understand that what I do here eventually impacts the environment maybe in Indonesia. And I think that is something that's very difficult for us to understand because I think my what I do now impacts me here, but that is totally not true. So I think that is the most important thing globally, and I would even really visualize that just to make it to make it seen that one activity in A affects the environment and whatnot circumstances in B. But I think it's also important to not keep it only on a global level. I think it's important to bring it down into what can I do right here in my society. When I walk out my door in my apartment, what can I do? Or in home, at home. Because I think when things become too global as well, I think we lose a bit track of our own accountability and what can I do, because it's always much worse, always somewhere else, you know? And that's I think it's a bit dangerous. I don't know, that was very
So
long. I don't know if it even makes sense.
I got your point that we need to see what's the same purpose, something like the common purpose.
Yeah,
Let's take the example, we globally face global warming or CO2 emission rising. Um, and then but we can discuss about what is the different practice, what they do in
yeah,
their own country, but uh what we can do still in locally, but we can try to discuss about different practice, but how to solve the
yeah,
problem is from the local. And one
Yeah.
thing that I got about how to help people, although they have like different environmental problem, is about donating. So in my hometown in West Kalimantan, we face like orangutan problem. So the orangutan land has been replaced by palm oil farm, and the donates are not only from Indonesia but from Europe. So that's also the
Mm.
global together action that made
Yeah.
me feel, oh, okay. When one nation can do need help from the other, so the other can help together. So that's
Yeah.
quite interesting for me about donating.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's also why it's so important what I said. I think your example is really good, Nikita, and it's also this thing of environmental issues being so broad because you're mentioning again
Mm-hmm.
a completely different topic, right, that we haven't talked
Mm-hmm.
about, which is well production of something taking space
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
the orangutan, which only I believe in that is in that area, right? It's the only in West
Mm-hmm.
Sumatra is the only place it
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
and that's again a completely again another sort of subtopic of environmental
Yeah.
issues. um yeah, no, it's a good example, and yes, indeed, it becomes a global thing, just like with hurricanes, with earthquakes, and then
Mm-hmm.
in the countries where it doesn't happen here in the Netherlands, and then we donate
Mm-hmm.
to other places
Mm-hmm.
where it does happen, of course.
Yeah, so we can still help each other even though we don't have that problem, but each human has their own humanity, emotions, so
Yeah,
they make us can work together even though we can't act exactly on the place, but we still can help each other. Yeah. So
yeah,
our
yeah,
meeting
yeah.
today also, although we can't meet in person, but we can meet online, and you can help Indonesian people to understand about how to start communicating.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice.
no,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. No, it's yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So that's close to the end of our podcast. My next question is, what advice do you have for individuals or organization looking to improve their communication skills about environmental issue with different community? For example, they want to talk with people, elderly people, because they have the high risk of getting environmental issue impact, and how can they communicate with different group of people, different group of age in this case.
Yeah. Good question. I think again the most important I'd say is to ask a lot of questions and to
Mm-hmm.
understand. Um, I think what's really beautiful about especially the older generation is that they've seen the
Mm-hmm.
impact with their own eyes. And that is
Mm-hmm.
something that, even though we read a lot of articles and whatnot, is something that we in the younger generation forget is that some people have experienced it throughout their lives. And I think those stories are really necessary. I
Mm-hmm.
read a book by David Attenborough, and he also
Mm-hmm.
lived this life of seeing the changes. So I think yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely a group that we sometimes forget. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to again ask questions of how do they
Mm-hmm.
experience it. Maybe I'm just assuming here, maybe they're going to share much more local stories of
Mm-hmm.
um how what kind of fish used to be in their oceans as a kid when they were swimming and now they're not here anymore. Maybe it's much more practical things and not
Mm-hmm.
on a theoretical global scale.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also think it's difficult to connect with someone to discuss about something that's very abstract if that's not where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'd say for any group it's about understanding where they see the changes
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah.
problems and the solutions and where they themselves think in their lives they can maybe sacrifice something to improve and then through that help, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where we struggle is sometimes we're not a lot of times we don't know enough to guide ourselves, right? I don't know, we don't really know how to divide the trash. We don't really know a lot of things and what to eat and what not to eat for the environment. And that's where then specialists like you can come in and educate. But we first need to understand. I mean,
Mhm.
telling a vegetarian to stop eating meat for the environment is ridiculous, right?
Mhm.
So that's a bit my point.
Mhm.
They already don't eat meat.
Mhm.
So that's a bit, and I'd say the last thing I really want to add to this is that what I've experienced, and I've talked a lot about it with friends as well, who seem to agree, is that environmental topics and environmental issues seems to come with a lot of guilt. It seems that we
Mhm.
have this guilt over it, like we all want to do better, but we also don't know how, and then sometimes we end up pointing fingers at each other because that seems a bit easier. And what I've noticed is that sometimes I find it difficult to talk about environmental issues with
Mhm.
people because they're like, whoa, I'm doing it perfectly correctly, or either
Mhm.
way, it's not my responsibility, or either way, it's the government who should tackle this, or either
Mhm.
way, Chinese production is much more strong than here, so it's not my
Mhm.
fault and whatnot. And I think that if we can just stop guilt tripping each other and
Mhm.
ourselves, and we can have a much more open topic, which is this is super complex, it's super
Mhm.
difficult.
Mhm.
I struggle with it.
Mhm.
And sometimes I do things that are wrong, even though I know I shouldn't do them.
Mhm.
Um, I think that would give a much more fruitful conversation is to eliminate the sense of guilt that we are putting on each other.
Yeah. I know
I
that
don't know if you can recognize
environmental.
it.
Yeah. I know that environmental issue is complex issue to tell with a different group of people. So we need to understand and we need to see what they see in their perspective. So rather than telling about more theoretical thing, we need to think about something practice and do able for them. So the key is tangible. Is it tangible or not tangible for them? Something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a lot of insight from you. And yeah, so thank you so much, Miss Miliki. It's that's all my question. But before we end this podcast, do you have anything to add in this podcast, or do you have some recommendation for people that want to start communicate to different group of people? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, I think my last sort of advice is you don't need to travel far to meet diverse groups of people, right? It can even
Mhm.
be, let's say you're always in a university environment, it can even be going to a
Mhm.
workplace environment.
Mhm.
It doesn't need to be much more it can be going to a friend's house to eat dinner instead of your own house, and then they have a different way of doing
Mhm.
things. So I think that's like my number one is like meeting diverse groups of people. It's really just everywhere. And I think
Mhm.
second, if you want to talk about, if you want to really understand other people's opinions, you need to also meet people with open curiosity. I think what
Mhm.
often happens, we ask a question, but we always have a favor of the answer. Like we hope they answer in a certain way that we also agree with, and that doesn't allow for a very diverse conversation.
Mhm.
Um, Ask very open questions. How do you view that? And then try your best to not judge in the moment. You can go home and journal all your judgments afterwards. I tend to
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
that if I get very frustrated, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have it doesn't it's not fruitful for a diverse conversation to
Mhm.
ask
Mhm.
open questions, but then also constantly tell your own opinion. Go
Mhm.
for the why, how come, what have you
Mhm.
experienced that makes you think like this? Can you give an
Mhm.
example? I've learned through my job to ask people a lot for
Mhm.
examples because people can say, I don't care about the environment because I never see things changing. And then, oh, okay, what is it that
Mhm.
you don't see changing? Can you give me an example of something?
Mhm.
Whatever.
Mhm.
Try to ask a lot of questions.
Mhm. Yeah.
That would be my advice. I hope
Yeah.
you use
Thank you
it.
so
I
much
hope
for the
everyone can use
advice.
it.
Yeah,
Of course.
the listener, I think the listener is happy to hear some insight from you. Yeah, I also think that the word multicultural is about nation, country, or different tribe, but we experience multicultural in our family. So that's
Yeah.
some, yeah,
Yes.
open-minded thing for me.
Yeah.
And rather
Yeah.
than try to argue about our argument, try to ask people, so we have like open question and try to
Yeah.
understand people opinion rather than disagree, or perhaps they have something that something good, something good in good reason, that's
Yeah.
make uh the other people have different opinions. So try to
Yeah. Yeah.
appreciate people opinion and try to open minded, and yeah,
Yeah.
don't disagree too much on people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, so what I want to say is that we can still disagree with people. We can still
Mm-hmm.
really think your opinion is very different from mine. I
Mm-hmm.
think where it goes wrong is when we say, you think this, so therefore you must be dumb.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To make it
Mm-hmm.
very concrete. And instead
Mm-hmm.
of understanding, okay, I disagree with you, but I also understand now it's because we've lived such different lives. We've gone around maybe
Yeah.
different kinds of people. We've had different experiences. So then you
Mm-hmm.
understand it, but you can still totally disagree. But it's more
Mm-hmm.
that you don't get to a point where you're like, I don't want to associate with you because you must be an
Mm-hmm.
idiot, if I can say that on the
No.
podcast.
Yeah.
But you must be this and that because you think something different, and that is where it goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when
Yeah.
we don't meet each other because
Yeah.
I disagree, as I said, with my family, with my grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
that I think, how can you think like that? But you understand they've lived in a time I haven't even experienced. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they should
Yeah.
have a different opinion than me almost, you know?
Yeah, we should have different perspective because our thought created by our experience, and we all have
Yeah.
different experience. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got a
exactly.
lot of
Exactly.
knowledge from you. Yeah, I also got
Thank you.
awareness from this podcast.
Yeah, good
So
to hear. Good
thank
to
you
heer.
so much, Miss
You're
Miliki,
very
for
welcome. It was a
sharing
pleasure.
a lot of knowledge about how to communicate with people, how to talk more tolerant and less assume with people, and we need to try to appreciate people and yeah, curious about people opinion. I'm sure that our listener also happy to hear about this. And thank you for all our listener for joining us. Stay tuned for more episodes of Kokamuhi podcast, where we explore how to make the world a better place. So before we uh, end this podcast, can we say salam superhero, Miss Wiliki? So I count one, two, three. So we say salam superhero together. Are you ready,
Yes.
Miss
Yes, of
Wiliki?
course. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay. One, two, three. Salam
Salam superhero.
superhero.
Salam superhero.
Yeah. Thank you
Almost.
so much, Miss
Thank
Iliki. See you
you.
next
Thank you for having
time.
me, Nikita. Good luck. Bye bye.
Yeah.